Welcome to the Community Artists Collective's annual event. This year, the focus is the art of collecting. Celebrating the art of collecting is a fundraising event for the Community Artists Collective, a 34-year-old nonprofit organization which focuses its activities on arts education, entrepreneurship, community development, and exhibitions. But first, let's hear from the collective's founders.
Go be you in your community.
Hi, I'm Michelle Barnes, co-founder, executive director of the Community Artists Collective.
I am Sarah Trotty, co-founder, board fundraiser of the Community Artists Collective.
The Community Artists Collective is a 501c3 organization dedicated to providing the educational and cultural link among African American artists and all communities, inspiring unlimited creativity.
Michelle and I are both art educators. We attended college together, became teachers in the Houston Independent School District, and trying to help foster that sense of creativity that's so important to all of us. We didn't want that element of humanity to be lost. And so it was a natural outgrowth of our beliefs. Started first with Michelle and Barnes Blackman Gallery, and very quickly grew into this community effort, hence the Community Artists Collective. And I would venture to say that if you spoke to almost any of the major artists who are Houston-based, now nationally, internationally known, there was some connection to the Community Artists Collective as they started out. So we are here for the artists at those early stages, and we support them to understand how to promote their work, how to get their work to the collectors, how to be entrepreneurs themselves, because it's more than just producing the work, and this is one of the things we talk about. And so we do a lot of community outreach so that people are aware of the artist, and the artists likewise are aware of the potential out there for their art.
In this space, we feature exhibition programming and some of our arts education programming, though the space is limited. We do work in collaboration with schools, libraries, other community centers to offer education classes and to facilitate exhibitions in the most appropriate spaces.
And I will add that we also participate with almost all of the festivals that you see in and around Houston, so we're very well known and recognized for the contributions to the arts here. And I can't not mention our quilting, which we think is an excellent program. Artists from the youngest to the oldest and most senior can enjoy the opportunity to piece their materials and come together with interesting designs. We have an excellent instructor, Leslie Abrams, who works with them, and we do these workshops weekly.
I'm Michelle Barnes, co-founder, executive director of the Community Artists Collective, and I encourage you to go be you in the community.
I learned a lot from that short introduction. I hope you did too.
Good evening, everyone. We're really excited to be here at the Marks Collection with two of my favorite people and two of my favorite people in the art world too. Both of those are very true, and this evening is a benefit for Community Artists Collective, a seminal nonprofit in Houston, Texas, that has been showing the work and focused on African American artists for going on 35 years, co-founded by Dr. Sarah Trotty and Michelle Barnes, and Michelle is the executive director. And what's special about tonight is we are at Casa Marks, the Marks Collection, which is devoted to international, national, and Texas artists, and they're all presented in a very extraordinary way with an ongoing art dialogue. And then we're here this evening for a conversation with Lester Marks and an artist that I know is part of art history, Trenton Doyle Hancock. And you know, this is a very special evening because this is not, none of us has met yesterday, okay? We have an ongoing friendship, and I just need to say a little something about both of everyone. I'll begin with Lester. There's not a museum or nonprofit board he hasn't served on. His house is always open to everyone, his collection. So we all feel when we see a Joseph Cornell or Carrie James Marshall or Trenton Doyle Hancock, we feel ownership of that work too, and it's rare. And if you show up with an extra person at Lester Mark's house, that person, especially an artist, will be brought in immediately and really, really welcomed. I know Lester's on the board now of Community Artists Collective. He chaired the luncheon for Carrie James Marshall, also on the Contemporary Arts Museum board, core program at Museum of Fine Arts and Houston Arts Alliance. And he's been on every other board too, and we could go on for 15 minutes. And then with Trenton Doyle Hancock, he is the artist that has put Houston on the map. He's been in the Whitney Biennial, not once, but twice, and one of the youngest artists to do that, 2000, 2002. And Trenton has an extraordinary practice that we learned about through his show at the Contemporary Arts Museum in 2014, the awesome drawing show, Skin and Bones, where we were able to see his childhood drawings and the development of a cosmology with the Mounds, the Vegans, and Torpedo Boy, Trenton's alter ego. And these are more than cartoons. They address the issue of race in America, an ongoing dialogue that we are really need to continue very importantly today. And I think what's really significant about Trenton, he's shown so much internationally, nationally, in MoMA, in Whitney, in the Metropolitan Museum collection. He's also been a huge part of the Houston community. He was in the Skin and Bones show, curated by Valerie Cassell Oliver at the Contemporary Arts Museum in 2014, which was named by Wall Street Journal one of the top 10 shows that year in America. He's also been Texas Artist of the Year in Art League in 2017. The Menil had an awesome Works on Paper show in 2019, and then we interviewed him at Paper City a number of times, and I remember one was on the eve of your Mass Mocha show, which was epic. And we've covered, and your work is so innovative, and I know it's in Museum of Fine Arts collection, it's in the Dallas Museum collection, Fort Worth Modern, and I know anyone that goes to the Jardinier is going to see your epic tapestry, which is so exciting. So without further ado, I want to have and listen to a conversation. I'd like you both to talk about when you first met and how everything began.
Well, first I'd like to say thank you, Catherine. That was such a eloquent and informative and beautiful kickoff. So thank you. Trent and I have been friends for, let's just say a couple of decades. I think that the most interesting thing I can tell you about our relationship is that I am Trent's adopted father. He is part of my family. He is my son. Very honored to have someone so famous and talented as you. And that is because when I was on the core program at the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, Trent was a core fellow, and I was lucky enough to be his adopted father. And I had the good fortune of picking out the best core fellow ever, and I've had the good fortune of being connected ever since with Trent, and the even better good fortune of, I think I have 7 of his works, and 5 of them are huge. So I'm very invested in Trent, both emotionally and artistically, because he is a great guy. Trent, one thing I'd like to start with is people hear that you're from Paris, and because you're so debonair in both looks and your art, they assume it's Paris, France. But that's not the case, is it?
Well, firstly, I want to just thank you both. Thank you, Lester, for having me, and thank you, Catherine, for your beautiful words and introduction. Let's not sell Paris, Texas short. It's a fine city, and I was happy to have grown up there. But yes, I took my first trip to Paris, France, a couple of years ago, and it was great. Got to visit the Louvre, my favorite toy store, which is called Lulu Berlou, and left town with lots of beautiful things in my brain and in my eyes and in my suitcase. But yeah, from Paris, Texas to Paris, France, it's kind of been an exciting journey.
So another thing Trent and I have in common is that I'm also from a very small town. I just did not grow up to be famous like this guy did. But
Lester, you're infamous.
Speaking of fame, I do want to say that Trent is represented by James Cohen Gallery in New York, which the New York Times at one point called James Cohan the greatest art dealer of our generation. So that's no small feat that Trent is represented by James Cohan. He's also represented in London by Hales Gallery, which is another formidable gallery in Europe. And so Trent, in your background growing up in Paris, Texas, at what point did you begin to become interested in the arts?
It pretty immediately, actually. I was taken care of as a child by my great aunt. I called her Aunt Fan. Her name was Fanny, but she taught me how to draw. You know, she was able to draw farm animals, and at the age of 2 or 3, I would mimic the way she drew them. And so that was my first entry point into, I guess, drawing. And it was just, it became the way I identified myself, as like, I'm the kid that draws. And eventually it became, I'm the kid that paints, and I design toys. I want to design video games. So it was like one thing led to another. And I knew that was going to be what I did for the rest of my life.
And did you have encouragement from your family? And then also to speak to the community that you were growing up in, because I wouldn't think that you were exposed to a lot of arts in Paris, Texas.
I picked up art wherever I could find it, whether it was from television, like looking at cartoons, or the comic books I had, or the toys, and my peers. You know, I had some very talented friends that also drew, and so it became competitive. It's like, okay, he's going to bring in a Spider-Man, and my Spider-Man's got to be better than that. So it was this kind of back and forth, and I was very fortunate to have had that. But also, yeah, my family is super supportive. They're all artists in a way. My grandmother was a quilter. My whole family are gospel musicians. So my mother, I grew up, playing drums in the church, and my mother was the choir director. And so there was always music and attention to the kind of poetry and the kind of beauty of things. So I was definitely exposed to art. And Paris had an art fair every year. So starting from kindergarten all the way up through high school, I would enter and compete in this citywide art fair. And that was, precursor to the art fairs that I'm part of now.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the type of art you do. For those of you that don't know, for most of Trent's career, and I think continuing to this day, Trent, some time ago in the early 2000s, created this mythology, this cosmology of otherworldly creatures that are predominantly controlled by the mounds and the vegans. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to how you morphed into that direction and the meaning thereof.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've always created characters. Like I knew from an early age, like in elementary school, that I wanted to participate in that way. It's like there's Spider-Man, Superman, the Incredible Hulk, all these characters that I would live through their, vicariously through their adventures, but then also feel like how do I become a participant in that way? So around the age of 10 years old, I created my own superhero, and it was me taking my glasses off, and I would become Torpedo Boy.
Torpedo Boy at 10.
And so incrementally, every 5-6 years, another character would come along, and I would put that in my vocabulary. And by the time I was in graduate school, I had all these characters, but they weren't necessarily interacting with one another. They're kind of on separate things. And by the time I moved to Houston in 2000, I was able to unpack all of that information at Glossell, at the core program, and I had a moment of clarity that, this needs to be a narrative. All of these characters need to be introduced to one another, and then find their futures and their pasts, really. So it became this starting point where I thought, okay, now I'm a world builder. I'm going to build this world out, and it has this epicenter, and things just kind of branch out almost like a network or spider webbing. And so by then, of course, I had accrued this interest in various histories: performance art, painting, comic books. So I wanted to weave all that together into a form that was uniquely my own, that felt like a home base that I could go to, but also provided enough movement in it within that space that it could grow. I definitely wanted to stretch my own abilities, and so creating that master narrative provided me a space to go into that. I could kind of be a scientist. I could test all of these parameters and the DNA of all these characters, and really go deep into it. And that was 21 years ago, and now I feel like I'm just learning who these characters are.
So have these characters become, in essence, your best friends? Or is there a tension between you and them? Or are they you?
Best
Torpedo
friends,
Boy?
Best friends, worst enemies. It's kind of everything. But I guess in a sense, it's a equilibrium, a way for me to stay equal to the rest of the world when things aren't going, the way I feel the world should be going, perhaps politically, culturally speaking. I can go back to that work, and I have these characters that I then can test out ways to bring, I can bring stories and solutions out of the story into my real life, and then I can deal with people, I can deal with the world, I can do this thing. So it's the work is very personal and very much about how to maintain an equilibrium.
You mentioned political. With the racial unrest that we've had over the last few years, and the very hideous political environment we've been through, it seems to have possibly influenced your work somewhat, in that I've seen some of your newer work has brought in some Ku Klux Klan elements to it.
Yeah, I mean that was part of my work in the 90s. It was actually in like 92, 93. That's when I first did my first deconstruction of the Klan.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it actually goes much further back than anything topical or polemical right now, because I've always had this understanding that something's a bit askew. I wasn't able to articulate this in 92, but now I have, like, looking back over the trajectory of my art, it's always been about probing into not just myself and my own boundaries, but cultural boundaries. And it's a lot about naming, like who has the power to name things, who has the power to, I guess, open doors and provide agency So that's always been a big part of the work. And, the characters, the Mounds and the Vegans and Torpedo Boy, it's a power dynamic, like when you really look at those stories. So in my own way, I've been testing that stuff through the paintings, through the stories or performances or what have you. It's I've always been in that space. So in some ways, I look at the news now and it's just caught up with where my brain was in graduate school.
I was fortunate enough to see your show at Mass MoCA. Mass MoCA is the physically largest museum in the United States. It's located outside of Boston, a couple of hours south. And they have the single largest gallery space in the United States. It's about a football field in size?
It's roughly the size of a football field, yeah.
What I saw in that football size space that Trenton put on was really indescribable. There were so many different elements. One thing that makes Trent unique is that, as he mentioned earlier, he's not just a painter, a quilter, a weaver. He's a toy maker, although I'm not sure, and a toy collector. I wonder if you'd speak to that a little bit.
Right. I can't speak about the toys unless I speak about this idea of truth. And for me, I've always been super interested in things that I feel are not fake, not trying to be something that they aren't. So I know I've always loved toys. As a child, of course, all children love toys, but I probably went past my expiration date in terms of collecting and being interested in that stuff well into high school. I was still going to the toy stores, looking at the shelves, and this is in the 80s. And it's not as unpopular to be a toy collector now. People don't call you a nerd or something, derogatory. But back then, they're like, how is this useful? How you going into the next phase of life? You need to leave that behind. So I don't think my folks quite understood why I continued to be interested in such things. But for me, it felt like the truth. It felt like, why, if I'm interested in it, then I can't go against my own nature. So that has always been there, and it's always been something that's influenced my paintings, that kind of color. And what I brought into the paintings was the plastic elements, like plastic detritus or the tops off of Coke bottles or detergent bottles. I collected those when I was a small child. I would have shoe boxes full of plastic tops, and I just thought they were so beautiful. It was like someone that is a gardener. For me, that was my garden, was these tops. So I just went back to that as an adult and started collecting them again. It was like, this is the truth, because the young version of me knew what the truth was, because he hadn't been corrupted yet.
And they're beautiful. Who says they're mean less than a sapphire?
They're a very exciting kind of objects that are industrially manufactured to be beautiful. It's why they look like that, because the people that are selling that stuff to us know that when we walk down the aisle in a store, the brightest colors are going to get our attention, So there's something about that I have co-opted into the work, and there's paint and there's everything else.
To see even one toy, which I have Torpedo Boy on my wall, is amazing, but just imagine a football size gallery, if you will, full of thousands of toys, each having a particular purpose and meaning. Again, one of the most magnificent installations that I've ever seen.
Thank you.
Trent, you mentioned about opening doors. One of the things you've done that is truly unique is you've opened so many doors for so many people here in Houston, not just artists, but organizations. You've given of your time so gallantly and generously. I'm sure that was something that was inside you as you were being raised,
And being part of
you were
the
being part of
community,
the second nature.
Well, growing up, my family, they were, very, like, do unto others as they, you would have them do unto you. I mean, I constantly go back to that, and if you put good energy out, good energy will come back to you. I mean, sometimes it doesn't come immediately back. And sometimes you're not thinking in terms of putting that energy out. It's just, you just do what feels right. And Houston has been a really wonderful place. And as I was telling Catherine earlier, I didn't find Houston. Houston found me. And it absorbed me into its presence. And so 21 years later, it's like, oh no, this is the forever place. I might go off to, Paris or New York or whatever, but I always come back here. And, to think that I in any way have opened any doors is, hopefully it's just that I can reciprocate the doors that have been opened for me.
There are so many young African-American artists here in Houston that look up to you, and they see what you've done, that you have stayed grounded, you've stayed connected to the community, and it has brought you great things, well-deserved. I would say that though you may not be the only artist in the collection of the Museum of Fine Arts, you are probably the most beloved artist in the collection.
Agreed.
As demonstrated by the new 40-foot, however long wall in Le Jardinier, the new French restaurant at the MFA, where one of your works takes up an entire wall of the magnificent. So that's quite an honor.
Well, I am totally honored, and it's a great institution, and I don't know what to say. I just feel good.
Do you have any advice for younger artists? What might you tell them about your journey, both good and bad?
Well, the best thing I can say is it goes back to what I said earlier about truth and trust. Trust in yourself. There's going to be tons of voices that are putting pressure on you to do certain things their way, to do things the popular way, but your voice may not be the popular voice, but it's one that you have to trust. So I'd say, I always tell artists to journal, like write a lot. Get your thoughts out of your head and out in front of you where you can see them, and that way you can really assess for yourself what the truth is, and then follow that. And that will take you a long way.
I learned that from my dad. Write things down. Write your thoughts down, and you can refer back to them later, and you can see how you're growing, or if there's a lack thereof, which there never has been in your case.
Very cool.
So, Trent, a couple of years ago, you got married to an artist. What's going on with that?
I did. Ju Young Che. She is amazing. It's going quite well. We just moved into a new place. She and me and our cat Lulu. So we're having a great time.
It was the young old cat. You adopted a cat.
Yes,
you thought was 20, and she's ended up being.
She is around 20 years old. But Ju Young, she's been working on a film for the past several years, and it's about to debut in a few short weeks. Here in Houston, so.
Oh, that's wonderful. And she is not only a wonderful artist, but like you, a wonderful person.
And this great
Thank you.
energy and collaboration. It's so much joy visiting.
Well, Thank you, and she definitely sends her love to both of you all, and wishes she could be here.
And we're going to wrap up because Mr. Hancock is on his way from here to London. So it's really been quite an honor.
And the paintings are going first, though, so they're going on Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's been quite an honor to be able to sit down with you at this wonderful event. And Miss Ann Spahn, do you have some closing words for us?
Well, I would encourage everyone to step out, be involved in the community, support artists, collect. You can buy something for $100 for an artist that's starting out. When you go to an event, there are many collect, support, be part of the community, of support a nonprofit like Community Artists Collective. And thank you for being here and everyone that's tuning in and listening. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm so happy you have joined us this evening with our virtual exhibition here. I'm sitting right now at the Community Artists Collective Gallery, and I want first to mention the wonderful works around in this space and encourage you at some time to come by and visit. The exhibit is Newer Forms, and it's up from October 29th through November 27th. Additionally, let's go back to the auction now. You'll see the piece that's on the easel here. This wonderful piece is by John Duncan, and it's entitled Miles Would Dig It. It's a 20 by 16 piece, and John Negrasso Duncan has used in the center of this piece the CD cover. So you have an authentic piece that's a collectible with wonderful swirling colors that represent some of Miles Davis. And so it's called Miles Would Dig It. If you've not already purchased your raffle, by all means go online and do so. To the Community Artists Collective, www.thecollective.org. We had some other pieces we want you to look at as well. Right next to me, this wonderful platter is by Nell Gottlieb. It was purchased by Jan West, and Jan has donated it for the auction. This plate was in an exhibit called Hooked on Cotton in 2019. There were wonderful pieces there. Actually, I purchased a piece myself. So this is a great piece for this auction. And if you like ceramics and you like history, you'll certainly want to put your bid in for the piece. And it's called, I want to make sure I get this correct now, I'm Not Thornton Dial. It's a 14 by 14 piece of ceramic. It's China paint and hand-built porcelain. We have another piece to share with you as well that's in the auction, and it's by Joe L. Mercer. I have it sitting right here by me. I want to show it to you. This one is called Second That Emotion by Smokey Robinson. It's a wonderful collage of works, images of Smokey, and it would fit with any decor, and any person that loves Smokey Robinson will certainly want to have this in their collection. And then there's one more piece I certainly would love to share with you. It's by Daniel Testvae. One of Daniel's pieces sold for a very high price last year, and now we want to share the piece that he has for this year. And that piece is called Urban Conversations. And it's a very large piece, 30 by 24 inches, and it's over here right behind me, if you can get a look at that. It's a wonderful piece by Daniel. There's so many pieces in this auction. These are just a few. Don't wait too long to get your bid in. Go online to www.thecollective.org and place your bid for the many pieces that are there. Thank you.
Let's meet the honorary chairs of tonight's event, Cheryl and Percy Crusoe. Collectors in their own right, the Crusoes are successful entrepreneurs and model business leaders. Cheryl is a 36-year industry veteran and is currently President Emeritus of Wealth Development Strategies, LLC, and published author of Real Lives, Real Money. Percy Crusoe IV is president of Frenchie's Sausage Company, Inc., and has been a business liaison of Frenchie's Chicken, one of the most popular Creole cuisine restaurants in Houston and surrounding areas, since 2006.
Well, I would like to say that we are both honored to be honorary chairs for the Community Artists Collective. We're both very busy, and but we love Michelle and Sarah and the work that they've done for so many years in the community. We are art collectors and love art, so it was something that we could not say no to. So we are honored to be selected to be honorary chairs this year.
One of the things that was an introduction to art in my family was Dr. John Biggers. He and my father attended Hampton together and were very good friends for a long time. And my mother also attended Hampton, and they were there together. And when Dr. Biggers was at TSU, and my family moved here in 1967, Dr. Biggers actually spent a lot of time at our house. He would come over, I would say, almost daily. And one of the things that he gave to us were proofs of some of his works that he had done. And in our home that we lived in when we moved to Houston, my mother set up a room dedicated to him. So the entire room was white, and the furniture in it was white, and the rug was white. The whole room was white, but it had black and whites of Dr. John Biggers, and he gave each of us in the family a piece that he named and gave to us. So that was, my first introduction to art here in Houston.
And that's a wonderful one. We love Dr. Biggers' work. I unfortunately did not have the opportunity to grow up in a home with art. And really my first introduction to art was Project Row Houses. And I was one of the founding board members. And it was just such a energetic place. And I loved the uniqueness of art and community, and having a place of art be sort of the safety net of Third Ward, the community that we lived in and raised our children in. And so I got to meet a number of wonderful young artists, and to see them at work, and all the installations over the years that Project Row Houses had, and the various forms of art that I wasn't aware of, that art was just not painting. It could be a lighting installation, just all the various forms of art. And so I fell in love with it, and I was able to collect a number of pieces of young artists at the time, whose work now has become quite well known. So, and through that experience, my daughter got to meet Rick Lowe, the founder, and she fell in love with art and started painting. And so she paints, and as well as a singer now. So my educational background is in law. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and my grandfather owned real estate. And so I was the one that kept his books as a very young child. And so I think that's where I got my entrepreneurial spirit from. I had a scholarship to attend the University of Houston, even though I wanted to go back to D.C. to go
Do
to
you have an
Howard.
audio level?
My family had moved to Texas, and I got the scholarship, so they said, you're going to go where the money is. And so that's what brought me to Houston. I did an internship very early on, thank goodness. I thought I wanted to be a CPA. And after that internship, I learned very quickly, excuse all the CPAs, but that I did not want to be a CPA. And I wanted to do something that had a little bit more variety in my day and something that allowed me to have a direct impact on people's lives, and in particular, that had a direct impact in a positive way on the African American community. And so I set out with this goal of financial literacy in the African American community and financial empowerment in the African American community. And I think it, for me, all fits back into our love of art. We love walking into our home that feels like history. And art to me tells a story. It's history. It's the one thing in life that I feel bridges. It's a way of communicating across races and gender and everything. And I think it is spiritual for me. And so the pieces that we select, they just touch me. And I have a great friend, Tina Knowles, and as a very young woman, I kept saying, you know, I'm not sure what to call the genre of art that I like. And she said, don't worry about that. Just you collect what warms your soul and what speaks to your soul. And so that's what we've done. And we have a very eclectic collection of art. That some of them are what we might call the masters, like Dr. John Biggers, and some of them young and aspiring artists. Some of the pieces are from Africa. We have pieces from Greece. We have pieces from Cuba. So just worldwide, and just pieces that have spoken to our souls. So.
Well, I moved to Houston in 1967. And my dad started Frenchies in 1969. At the time, I was at Texas Southern University. And after graduating from Texas Southern, I went to work for Ford Motor Company in Kansas City. I worked there 5 years, and my dad called me one day, and he asked me to come back to Houston to work in the family business. And his wise words to me was that I would never own Ford Motor Company. So, you know, I absorbed that and said, you're right. So I came back in 1977 to join the family in the family business. So one of the things that I learned after coming back is that my dad was very involved in the community. And whatever was going on as far as fundraisers, activities to raise money, give money, my dad was always there to support. And it didn't make any difference what it was he supported. And so I do the same thing now, is that we support everything that we can. And a lot of times you can't do big things, but you can do small things. So, for example, us chairing this event is a small thing. All it takes is, you know, just some time out of our day to be able to do it. But I would say that we look for opportunities to be of service to the community. And what I have to realize, and what I tell people, is that my success, our success, Frenchie's success, comes from this community. And it's not from outside this community. I mean, it's right here in the middle of it. And so I have to give back. And it really makes me feel good that I can give back. And when asked to do something, I almost never say no. And so we are just, honored to be able to chair this event. And as Cheryl has said, it kind of, strikes our heart with art, something that we love, cherish, and collect.
I want to say that I love the Community Artists Collective because it exposes young people to art. It exposes the broader community at large to art, something that I didn't have the privilege of having when I was young. And I think it's so very important, especially for the youth, to be exposed to all forms of art. We love what we have collected. The pieces that we have are part of our family, and it's something that we want to give back to the community once we're no longer here.
Hello again. I am, again, Barry Barnes, president of the Board of Directors of the Community Artists Collective. And I am here at this moment to talk about a couple of ways in which you can participate in our fundraising event. First, we have a raffle, and this is a very interesting piece. It's by John Duncan, and the title of it is Miles Would Dig It. Dimensions are 20 inches by 16 inches, a very colorful piece, and if you can see it close enough, there's a part of it that's taken from the CD cover of one of Miles's famous albums, Bitches Brew. It's a wonderful piece, and actually, I was hoping that it would be in the auction because I was going to bid on it. But the organizers decided to make it a raffle item, which we all would get a chance to participate in, and I just hope that I win. I need to buy a lot of raffle tickets. Moving to the auction, the piece to my left is by Romeo Robinson, and it's entitled, I May Have Been Born Yesterday, but I Stayed Up All Night. It's 18 inches by 18 inches, and it is a wonderful piece. That will be on the auction. It's part of the auction. The next item is by Eddie Fowler, Jr., and this item entitled Louis Armstrong Showtime. It's all on canvas, 20 inches by 16 inches, and it is over my right shoulder. You can see it there. Another wonderful piece. It is interesting to note that artists are inspired by musicians. We have a piece that is entitled Miles Would Dig This, and then we have another piece that invokes Louis Armstrong, two of the more famous jazz artists in music history. The last item that I want to talk about is by Douglas Welsh, and it's entitled Pearl's Dream, and it's an 18 inches by 20 inch piece. Do I need to pick this up? And I will pick this up and so you can see it. Again, this is a wonderful abstract piece. I believe it's house paint on canvas, which immediately piqued my interest because I do paint houses. The real houses, not paint houses on canvas, but the real houses. But anyway, this is a wonderful piece as well. And so these are just examples of the wonderful artwork that will be available during this event, either for the raffle or during the auction. And as I said before, I will be bidding on all three of these pieces, and I will buy plenty of raffle tickets to ensure success in the raffle. I hope that you join me in competing for these pieces. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks so much, Barry. And like he said, keep bidding out there. Well, the virtual audience will now get some insight from the collecting wisdom of Lloyd Geit. Lloyd is an award-winning former television reporter and a recognized collector of African and African-American art. In fact, he has a stunning collection. When you enter Lloyd's home, you might think you've walked into a museum rich with art from around the world. But Lloyd actually lives in his art-filled contemporary home he built 2 years ago for his art as he continues to manage his African and Afro-Cuban art gallery in the heart of Houston's legendary Third Ward. Sarah Trotty sat down with Lloyd in his art-filled museum-like home to talk about why he collects and gain some real insight on the art of collecting.
It is so wonderful to be here with you and in your home, and to have an opportunity to talk with you about the art of collecting. We know that's your passion.
It is my passion. It's something I've been doing since I was pretty young. You know, that whole term collecting means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Yes. But as a child, I had an eye for art and a desire to collect art. But then the art that I collected as a child, of course, is not the same art that I collect today. So collecting is a long-term endeavor.
So what kind of things did you start out with? What caught your eye and what started this passion?
It's funny, but I've always liked images of black people.
Okay.
When I didn't have money, that's not to say that I have much money now. When I didn't have money, I would go and get a calendar and cut the black faces off of the calendar, go to the Goodwill or the Salvation Army and buy frames and frame them and put them in my house.
You started that as a young...
I started that at a very young age.
Middle school, elementary
Probably middle school. Probably middle school. And then even throughout college, you come to my house and I had those same pictures on the walls because I couldn't afford anything. But I also knew what art could do and would do for your sensibilities.
So was there a relative or anybody that inspired this passion?
No.
Or how did it start?
No. I just think it was something that was within me.
Okay.
It's just like I've had a fascination with Africa since I was a child. And nobody put that there. Somebody put it there, but not anybody who was a relative or a friend or none of that. Because back in the day, we weren't really collectors per se, even though that's not a new phenomenon of collecting, but nobody in my family collected art.
Yeah. Usually it was just a picture of Jesus Christ on the wall or something
And
like that.
thank God we didn't have a picture of a blonde, blue-eyed Jesus Christ in our house. Okay. I don't know why. Maybe I'll ask my mother that sometime, but I don't know. We never had that.
So what about school? Was there any impact from that direction?
None. I think I was just a regular kid at a regular black school where nobody even talked much about art except an art class. But I have been given a good eye to see art and to appreciate art and to understand how art can influence your psyche, your well-being. I love coming home. I love coming home because I'm greeted by my art.
Yes.
And it gives me such a great feeling to be around such wonderful pieces. And that's why I collect. I mean, psychologically, it has an effect on me.
I can understand that. And last year we had that kind of focus on the impact on art, on our mental abilities and thoughts. So that's an important way. And you knew very young that you wanted to collect art.
I did know. I don't think I would call it collecting because I didn't know what that term was, but I knew that I loved art. And as long as I loved art, I knew that I always wanted art around me. And as I grew older, it just became more common for me to consider myself a collector.
But you didn't think about being an artist. You started writing, maybe?
I started in television and print.
Okay.
I've never thought about being an artist, even though I think at an early age, that was one of a vision that I had that I could, in fact, have been an artist. But writing and television won out. And so for 25 years, I did that. And it was time for me to move on to another life. So I'm living another life, and part of that life is collecting and enjoying art and selling art and helping other people to become collectors and to enjoy art and to understand what art can do for you and those around you. I mean, people come to my home or to my gallery, and they are just enamored by the large number of pieces and just the color and the feeling that's in the art. People really, it resonates with them quite a bit. And that makes me feel good.
Yes, it is. It's mutual.
To make other people feel good makes me feel good. And my art makes me feel good.
Yes, so your opportunity to travel and see other parts of the world, did that also influence your...
Oh, that is primarily what influenced my collection at a later date. My first trip to Africa was in 1974, shortly after I finished undergrad. And I fell in love. I was smitten. And I fell in love with the art. And when a lot of people talk about African art, even though I collect all kinds of art, when we normally talk about African art, we think of masks and fabrics and statues. We don't think of what I call fine art, original paintings by African artists, which is another whole dimension. So that is primarily what I do now as a collector and as someone who is a buyer for my art gallery. That's primarily what we do, the paintings, the fine art by African artists. And that's what we do. But yeah, my trips have certainly influenced my art collecting. You know, I spent 6 weeks in Russia, and of course I fell in love with Russian art. Who would have thought? And everywhere I go, because the art is so different in various places. It's like out of all the countries in Africa that you go to, they have such different art from the south to the west to the north to the east, and you're just like a kid in a candy shop. There's so much beauty there. But you got to be, as a collector, you can't get too ahead of yourself, because you got to watch your pocketbook.
That's important. That's important. And art is visual. That art is definitely visual. So no matter where you are, there are going to be things that are going to impact you visually in some ways. What are some of the things that have really stood out in your travels that influenced where you are today with your art?
Wow. I think just the fact of opening my eyes to the world, as opposed to opening my eyes to a city or a smaller place. I think when you travel, especially international travel, you begin to see things in a whole different light. You begin to see how people really do live. And to me, that's important. There are no boundaries, or at least I try not to set boundaries in terms of what I do. Even as a collector, I try not to set boundaries in terms of, oh, well, I didn't like that art, or I didn't like that art because it's from there, it's from there. No. I try to be an open vessel and let things just be poured into me when it comes to art and collecting art. And it's a very individual, very subjective thing. What you like, I might not like, and vice versa. And I tell people, buy what you like.
Yes.
Buy what you like. If you can afford it, buy what you like. Unlike some of my friends who can afford $100,000 John Biggers, I can't afford that, but maybe I can afford a lithograph or a limited edition print or something like that. Even though I do encourage people to buy as much original art as they can. I would tell a collector, if you can buy original art, buy original art. And people were like, well, where do you buy it? Here in Houston, Texas. There are artist communities all over the world. There are some great artists right here in Houston. And if people say, well, what should I collect? I'll tell them, find some local artist whose works you love and buy original paintings from them. Because you never know. It's just like a John Biggers. You never know how big those people are going to get. I hear stories John Biggers would do work and give paintings, original paintings, to friends of his and classmates of his. Who would have known that a John Biggers might be worth $1 million today? Who would have known that back then? So I take a chance collecting local artists whose works I love. I mean, I have several local artists. They are here. They are in every major city. And chances are you can afford their work, which is important.
Yes, and so we're at Collecting 101.
Collecting 101.
Getting started, even if it's something quite small, and even if it's making a relationship with an artist. Which brings me around to the fact that a lot of times we look outside of where we are to think that something's always better. But Houston is definitely a magnet for the arts and a great local place, and you've had some experiences.
Houston is a great market for local African American artists. And unfortunately, they are at a point where they need as much support from us as possible, because they are not given what's due in terms of white galleries. It's usually the creme de la creme of African American artists that can get into a white gallery. Most of them, because there are not many black galleries in the city of Houston, which is another sore point. We need more representation in terms of Africa. We have an African art gallery. We don't sell African American art, but we need more galleries that sell African American art, because we have such great artists here in the city of Houston. I mean, I could name 7 or 8 artists that I collect locally who I think are just at the top of their game, and they are still affordable. Collecting 101, like you said, get something it doesn't have to be outrageously large, as you said, but you can still find really large pieces at good rates from a lot of the local artists here. I'm a big fan of several of the local artists.
Yes. And when we look at the market now, there's so many young artists, contemporary artists, who are working in contemporary styles. And so we get to this whole point, well, what is black art? It's a whole nother issue.
What is black art? Collecting 101. What is black art? That definition has certainly expanded because you mentioned the contemporary artist. And I'm not sure how I feel about the real super contemporary artists. A lot of the stuff that they're doing now does not resonate with me. But I'm kind of considered to be an old school collector. So there are certain things that don't appeal to me that are being done by black artists, but they're still artists and they're still to be respected. And somebody's going to come along and love what they do, despite the fact that I might not love it. But I tell people, buy what you love. Unless you're at an economic level where you can buy for investment. That's collecting 202.
Yes.
If you can afford $500,000 for an Elizabeth Catlett or John Biggers or any of those people, buy it. I can't, but I can still love it and admire it and tell other people who have $500,000 you should buy that.
Well, part of what we do at the collective is we try to encourage not only emerging artists, but emerging collectors, those beginning collectors who want to learn about what we do. So we have salons, we have workshops, we have entrepreneurship programs, and sometimes collecting lead into a business like yours, and sometimes it doesn't. But it's still collecting, and that's the most important thing. So talk to me a little bit about it.
You have to teach collecting. It is almost like a course. You need to learn, first of all, that there are people who collect. And you should try very hard to become a collector. I think that that's just one of the most beautiful things out there, is collecting art. I mean, you can collect a bunch of other things, but art in particular, but it is something you need to learn. There is, like you mentioned, Art 101. I mentioned Art 202 or 201 or whatever. There are things that you need to know to protect yourself. I mean, how do you decide what's valuable in terms of art? That's another whole class on collecting 101. How do you know that is worth $500,000? Who said that? That's worth $500,000. And unfortunately, a lot of African Americans are not the ones who are putting price tags on this art. It is somebody of a European descent who's putting prices on our art. And at some point, we need to twist that. And we need to decide what, in fact, is valuable and not let somebody else decide what is valuable. And I try to do that in my business. I decide what's valuable in terms of African art. Somebody might say, well, what gives you the power to decide? Well, what gives them the power to decide? At least I'm closer to the table, being of African descent myself, where I can do that. But that's another little tidbit for collecting 101.
And so this is where we come into that term called provenance. We look at how do you research, how do you find out about it? I've found that a lot of collectors not only collect the work of an artist, but they also read about that artist. They follow the artist, right? They go to the galleries, the exhibits. They see what other people say about them. They see how many people are collecting that particular artist. So there are many ways of finding out about the artist. They look at, well, how much more has someone else paid for a work that's similar?
It's not that difficult to find out the pricing. I mean, thanks to social media, you can find out anything. I was appalled when I found out just through social media what somebody paid for a house. And I'm like, that's personal information. Why would the world have access to that? But the positive side of that is that you can find those things through social media, who the artist was. Now, unfortunately, because people don't necessarily take African American art and artists, don't hold them in such regard, that there's not a whole lot of information about African American and the African American artist community. You know, we know about Elizabeth Catlett, Jacob Lawrence, and people like that, but there are a whole...
Carrie James Marshall.
Yes.
All those who've made it.
All of those, but there are a whole bunch of people that we know nothing about. So we need to be diligent in trying to document more documentation of who these artists are, and that's another 101 collecting.
Then you bring me to something else. The writing about the artists, the discussions, those kinds of things. How does that help inform one?
Well, I try to find out as much information about an artist as I possibly can, especially if I'm going to buy the piece, so I can be able to talk with that artist. That's easier said than done in a business like mine when you go to Africa, and getting a bio of an artist can be a little more difficult than one would think. I mean, I've actually gone to the extent of interviewing some of my artists themselves, getting information from them, coming back here and doing bios on them, and then sharing those bios, which are their bios, with them, because they didn't have access to putting together a bio. Again, you want to have as much information, especially if social media doesn't have it. You want to have as much information about your artist as you possibly can.
Which is another thing about the young artists. Many of them need to engage. You know, I've heard many artists say, well, I just make the art. You know, I need somebody else to do all the rest of the work, to talk about it, to...
That's a luxury. That's a luxury that most artists don't have. Right. If I look at an artist who says, well, I don't sell my art, I let somebody else do that. But I'm like, if you don't set the tone, then chances are somebody might not ever come across your path to help you on your journey. You might have to do this journey by yourself. So, like, I had to learn about business. An artist needs to learn about marketing. You need to market yourself and not wait on somebody else to market you, because people want more than just your art. They want to know who you are, what inspired this, and what kind of person are you? I need to know about you as an artist. But so many artists say that, especially the young artists. They're like, oh, I don't have time to do this or time to do that. I'm too busy painting. I'm like, okay, well, chances are you won't be going too far. You got to multitask and tell people who you are and why you are. And that's important.
And that's why going out to these exhibits and networking and getting to know the gallery owners becomes an important part of being an artist as well as a collector. So, you know, many artists are also collectors as well, because that informs their own art. I found reading, and I want to get to that a little bit because you're a journalist and I know how important reading is to you, and talking with people. Yes, what does that do?
I think for too long, especially again with social media being the way it is, we don't connect. We don't connect like we used to connect. We don't sit down and talk about whatever we need to talk about. We're texting you 3 words here, and you know, we just don't do what we need to do to keep in contact and to share personal moments. There's only so much you can share in a text, and you can't necessarily communicate feelings, and that's what we need to do more of. Like, I'll sit down and talk to an artist for a long time to figure out what it is he or she does and why it is. And if you can't explain that to me in a text, I mean, I don't think that I'm going to get from a text what you can give me in person. Now, collecting 101, sometimes it's difficult to meet with these artists, but you can always try. And because I was in television for so long, I was able to actually meet with the artists that I collect, a lot of them that I collect. So persistence. I think if you're persistent about wanting to meet the artist, and if the artist has a showing, go to the show. Try to corner him or her and talk about art. People don't do that enough. They don't ask enough questions. That's what you got to do. That's part of collecting 101.
So we're looking at a number of things. We're looking at communicating. We're looking at experiencing the art itself, being around it, being around opportunities to see the artist at work and with others, as well as getting to know the work. I mean, would you say buy a piece of work the first time you see it, or how do you go about that?
Now, if I really like a piece, let's say the piece costs $20,000. I might ask and I'm not 100% sure, but I might ask the gallery owner, can you put a hold on that piece, that $20,000 piece, for 24 hours and let me sleep on it? And chances are they'll say, of course, we can do that. So that way you don't let it get away like I've done in the past and let things get away from me. There's nothing worse than falling in love with a piece and the next day somebody else comes and buys it. That's a hard one, especially if it's an investment piece. And that's what I did. I walked away from an investment piece that I did love, but it was a great investment because it was an artist from the Harlem Renaissance, and it was an original piece. It was small, but it was wonderful, and I walked away from it.
Yes. And you've had so much that you've been able to share with why you collect, and we appreciate that so much. I've learned a lot.
The pleasure's mine.
Yes. And I hope that our audience has learned a lot by hearing and seeing you as you talk about art and art in your life. And I hope you've touched a spark somewhere. I mean, I feel your passion. And I'm sure that others can feel it over the screen. And if they can feel it that way, then hopefully we'll encourage them to go out and to
become collectors.
Become collectors. Go to these galleries, meet these artists, meet the gallery owners, understand how you can start. And you don't always have to have a lot of money.
No, you don't.
Some people allow you to do the layaway plan still.
Mm-hmm. We call it art away. We call it art away.
Yes.
Well, thank you, because these issues need to get out there, and we need to teach more people about collecting.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you.
Well, hello again, everybody. In just a moment, you're going to get a chance to meet two wonderful local artists. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the collective and about Michelle Barnes, who many of you know, and Sarah Trotty. And really, the whole beauty of the collective is the women that run it, because they are really, I've always referred to Michelle as kind of an earth mother of art. There is virtually no artist in town who doesn't know Michelle, who hasn't been nurtured by her, and she really is just such a key element when it comes to artists, certainly artists of color in our city, and we're very grateful for her. Well, there are a lot more things to cover, including opportunities, as you heard, for both our online virtual artists, which is all of you out there, and our in-person reception guests. You can purchase raffle tickets. These are fantastic. It's an original piece of art, John Negrasso Duncan's tribute to Miles Davis, entitled, you're going to love this, Miles Would Dig It. And he definitely would dig it. And then there is the online art auction of over 50 works by recognized local and Texas area artists. You don't want to miss out on that. Don't forget your auction bids and your raffle ticket purchases. So while we're sitting here talking, you could already be shopping out there. It's always exciting to be able to do two things at one time. Well, I want to introduce you to three artists who are in Lester Marks' collection. And as we've told you, Lester Marks is a collector on a scale all his own. But in particular, I want to talk about two gentlemen here. Mark Francis is a multidisciplinary artist who deals primarily with the perception and intimate knowledge of oneself and others beyond superficiality. And we're going to let him explain to us what that means. We have one artist who is not here right now. And why don't you go on back there for me? Erica Alonso is a Cuban-American artist working and living in Houston, a self-taught artist, and an unabashedly painterly painter. And finally, Lamont French survived COVID, bless your heart there, and reignited his career as a result. He has a Basquiat influence in his work, but he's quickly creating his own style. He began curating his own solo shows at spaces like the Houston Museum of African American Culture, or HMAC, one that I'm very intimately familiar with, and the Lloyd Geidt Gallery. So we want to talk a little bit, first of all, I think I'll make you my first victim, if that's how they put it.
That works for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you work in multimedia.
Yes.
I know that much. What would you say is your inspiration? What really moves you?
Honestly, Black folks. My work deals with, as you said, the perception of self and others, primarily in the Black community, and it's really a focus that's important to me because I think it's more important how we see ourselves than how anyone else sees us.
Yeah.
Right. So my work deals a lot with that, the pride of being Black and the beauty in the mundane, everyday us.
I always like to ask artists, first of all, why you decided to do this. So many of us fancy ourselves to be artists, and we're not. But what moves you? What made you start painting in the first place?
Well, my brother. My brother was an artist, and when he passed in 2008, I kind of was reignited in my passion for art to kind of continue the legacy for him and myself.
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say how sorry I am that you lost your brother. But I'm sure he is very happy to know that you continued the legacy that he started.
To think so.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you get started on a particular day, what moves you? Do you get up every morning and paint, or do you just do it when you really feel the mood?
Nah, it's kind of a Chuck Close thing. Like, you know, the professionals get up and work. So every day I go into my studio and I work. And if I'm not feeling it, that's fine. Turn on some music and let's get to work.
All right. Lamont, do you work that way too? Or are you pretty much a get up and get going every day?
Yeah, I have a studio space to where, if need be, I actually could live in there. It has a bathroom and a shower, a kitchen, a sink. Just because from one of my mentors, he taught me that as long as you're in that space, everything that's in there that inspires you, you have a relationship with it. Even if you're not working, like Mark said, you're still in there and you're listening to music or you're writing. You know, I'm always trying to use different techniques, whether it be collaging or, you know, actually contemporary painting or just looking at different styles. But for me also too, I use a lot of content in my work. So I'm always surfing the internet. I'm looking at what's going on today. And then I have a lot of history books because I like to bridge the gap between past history with what's going on in current history. And that's either through religion or fashion or mythological legends or things of that nature. Just because I like to remind people what has happened and why we are where we are with the content of today. So that's the premise of my work.
Boy, it sounds like there's such a breadth of work there to cover. Now, we said that you were inspired initially by Basquiat. What about his work really moved you?
You know, for Jean-Michel, it was the content. It was how he was always able to take these childlike figures but give them heavy content, and then just the fact that he was self-taught and he birthed a whole genre of artists who weren't refined,
right? And
he was still able to communicate and create beauty with chaos. But honestly, my biggest influence is Miles Davis, because not just him, but like jazz artists like Thelonious Monk, Duke Ellington, John Coltrane.
True jazz artists, so the purest form, yeah.
And the reason I look at them as my biggest influence is because they're making art without a picture and without words. They're making just these noises. So I studied the composition of a jazz song that they put in. And Miles Davis didn't write sheet music.
Yeah.
So it has to flow because my work is kind of chaotic. It's funny because Mark was actually, in the beginning of my career, he was one of my first interviewers. And we talked about just the influence of Jean-Michel, but being able to kind of find my own path. And that has helped me just by studying a different discipline of a type of creative.
Yeah. So. Well, next time I'll let you do the interview. I had no idea there, but that's a good thing to know. How would you describe your style? How would you describe your work?
Well, for myself, I call it a simplistic complexity.
Okay.
So it's where you take these simple images. It could be a magazine cover. It could be a car. To use those two examples. So I made, instead of making Vogue, I did a magazine cover and I called it Vulture. And it just talks about the nuances and the contradictions of which we have in the political system. And then like I took a taxi cab and I used that as the premise and main face of $100 bill, because propaganda is what drives revenue. throughout society.
Yeah.
So that was the basis of it. But that's just a couple of examples. The content, that's what is the basis of my work. And I just try to take the techniques and the materials and layer them and just, I present it in what I like to do is take an uncomfortable conversation and dress it up, get people to come into a room and lock the door. And then we'll have the uncomfortable conversations that they don't want to have about the work. So.
All right, because he mentioned that, why don't you ask him a question and you get to ask him one.
Wow.
I know, I love this. I love when artists get to talk to one another. So, where's that? Since you were the first interviewer, you get a chance.
Well, so I'm actually interested because I know that you are delving more into what you believe is more you. And I can say from seeing your last show, your work is taking a turn, and you are showing us more of yourself. What do you think the true impetus for that was? Like, where do you think that started?
I had to kind of dig a little bit deeper in myself to what I was going through in my own life experiences. And that I was a little bit more vulnerable in my last collection in June, which was titled Fuego. So just being more transparent and more vulnerable in my work, and also too, just practicing and honing in on my craft. So that's where that comes from. And then also too, taking the things that I learned from people that have mentored me and influenced me, and then kind of just creating it within my own style.
How do you feel about that, though?
As
far as like this new trajectory for your work and how it's evolving, how do you feel about that?
It just feels natural. So, and I think that's why the work it's becoming better, and the opportunities that I'm starting to get are presenting. And then you start to hear more people get away from describing my work like Basquiat's, and it's kind of, you can tell it's Lamont French's work. So.
And I'll just say I told you so.
All right, what's your question for him? Because I know we've only got a little bit more time.
Just because, I kind of know Mark's journey, and I know where, the photography aspect of where you came from. So what made you kind of hone in and focus and take that leap? Because I remember when we talked about you taking that leap.
Well, my necessity to create came from a necessity to live, right? So dealing with the depression that I dealt with and all of that, on the backside, I had no choice but to create, right? Because it not only helps me to learn more about the people that I've photographed and created these drawings from, but it also helped me to learn more about myself through the creative process, right? The decisions that I make, the way that I'm honing in on the energies from the images of these people and things like that. It's like a convening of spirits and being able to really, really delve deeper into who I am as a creative and why I need to create.
Oh, next time I'm going to just cut out the middle one, which would be me, and let you all interview each other. But a question I have for future artists out there, and I don't know how both of you arrived at this decision, but there are a lot of young people who don't realize that being an artist is a full-time job, that it really is a career choice and not just something you do, in your off hours. What would you say to would-be artists out there who are really contemplating this walk of life?
The best piece of advice I can give is actually one that the Marcellus patriarch gave to all his boys. If you have a fallback, you're gonna fall back, right? So if you're gonna make art, if you're gonna make music, whatever you're gonna do, you have to commit to it. And there's always a way to make money, right? But there's not always a way to fuel yourself in a way that doing something that you're passionate about does. So just not having a fallback, focusing on what it is that you want to do and pursuing it doggedly.
Do you feel like if you don't make art, you won't be able to breathe? Is it that kind of a motivation?
It became that.
It
became that. It's part of a much longer story, but it absolutely became that.
What about you? What would you tell?
For
others?
me, I'm going to quote one of the trio of the CEOs of Rockefeller Records, Kareem Burks, and just say, bet on yourself. It's as simple as that, because if you bet on yourself, you're not gonna let yourself lose.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you kind of got to dig deep down in the pit of your stomach some days, but still you have to, because it's you locked in the studio. It's your ideas. It's you that has to commit and actually make the work.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you have influences, it's you that actually have to put hand to paper, hand to canvas, hand to paintbrush, things of that nature. So, like I said, I would just say bet on yourself.
Now, you both do mixed media, is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
And that's the thing. Mixed media is it's exactly what it said to be. It's a handful of different things. So.
And do you just look at objects? Do you just look at objects and say, that's got to be in my next piece of art?
Sometimes.
So, in other words, do you build from the outside in or the inside out, I guess? Do you find something and say, this is speaking to me, I've got to figure out a way to tell its story? Or do you kind of have a big canvas in the beginning and things make their way there?
For me,
maybe I'm not asking that clearly enough.
No,
you're asking fine.
Yeah.
For me, I have a photographic memory, so I can actually see the image in my head.
Wow.
And then I can find trash or just anything, foam board, cardboard, and use it. I'm just trying to get the image that's in my head, from color to aesthetic to even how it's framed. I can already see it in my head.
Wow. And that whole photographic memory thing is a whole conversation in and of itself.
Yes.
Have you always known that about yourself? That if you
Yes.
saw something, it sticks there forever?
Well, I'm a former athlete, so that kind of honed in my mind, because you have to see how things move before the actual game day. So that's where that comes from.
Wow. All right. What about you? Does it work from the outside in or the inside out?
It depends. It's a form follows function kind of thing, right? So my mixed media work that I'm doing currently is portraiture. So generally, I'm thinking about what the subject had on when I photograph them, because I go out and I photograph people first. So I'm thinking about what their clothing look like, and that's where a lot of the mixed media comes in. I use different sorts of decorative paper, rice paper, and mulberry paper to create their clothing. So it's what gives me the same feel but stands out at the same time. So not really focusing too much on the exact look, but what it needs to feel like, what will pull people in and engage them. So it just really depends.
Now, do you paint from your photographs?
Yes, but I'm never going for a hyper realistic rendering. It's always something that feels a little bit off, but I do want you to feel as though you're convening with the people that are in the images.
Well, you guys, we are getting the big wrap, but I've certainly enjoyed this conversation with both of you. As a collector, I love to hear the process, and you have been very helpful in sharing that. So thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you for talking with us.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
And of course, this is work you'll all want to see, believe me. Well, I'm going to turn it over now to Reggie Quinterly and company once again, while your virtual and reception guests out there take that important moment to purchase an additional art raffle ticket and bid on your favorite art auction item here. Trust me, this is a fantastic raffle, and you'll be mad at yourself later on that you didn't decide to do it. And in the meantime, of course, keep on bidding. There are some fantastic pieces out there. Thanks, guys, again. And we're going to turn it over to Reggie Quinterly.
Norman Nelson, managing partner and management committee member of the law firm Linebarger, Goggin, Blair, and Sampson, LLP, is being honored as the Community Artists Collective Patron of the Year.
I am Barry Barnes, the president of the board of directors of the Community Artists Collective. And we are here during this virtual fundraising event that the collective has on an annual basis. And at this point in time, we would like to honor the Linebarger Law Firm. And we have here with me Norman Nelson, who is the managing member of the Linebarger firm. Over the years, Linebarger, through the help of Norman, has been very supportive of the collective and in our endeavors. I think for at least the last 5 years, Linebarger has made an annual contribution to this fundraising event, which has allowed the collective to persevere through the years, and particularly through the last 2 years during this pandemic period. So this year, we would like to honor Norman Nelson and Linebarger Law Firm as the Community Artists Collective Patron of the Year. And as a indication of this honor so that they can display wherever they choose in some prominent place in the law firm, we are proud to provide this gift as an indication of their support and an indication of our appreciation of their support. You know, Linebarger has been in the community for decades, since the early 80s. Working on behalf of municipalities and other governmental entities in terms of helping those entities meet their revenue projections. And they've done a wonderful job for the city, wonderful job for Harris County, wonderful job for Houston Independent School District, and in turn allows them to be the patron, the philanthropic entity that this community needs. And through their generosity, they have benefited the collective, and we would just simply thrilled to be able to honor them this year in this way as the Community Artists Collective Patron of the Year. And I'll turn it over to Norman to have him to say a few words. But again, Norman, thank you very much for your support. And we thank Linebarger, your colleagues, your partners, your members. Everybody plays a part in this, and we thank them all.
Well, no, this is quite an honor, Barry. And on behalf of the law firm Linebarger, again, I am really, very appreciative and honored, for this. And this is, it's almost like, I don't know what to say. This is very nice, very nice. And so, again, on behalf of the Linebarger firm, as people, we collect receivables, delinquent taxes, fees and fines, you name it. And as the old saying goes, nobody likes a tax assessor collector. Well, we represent the tax assessor collector and the governmental entities. But Linebarger, we really want to be a good corporate partner. And so all of our employees, self-included, it starts with me, all the different communities where we live in, work in, play in, we want to give back. For school districts, education foundations, we really play a large role in that. And so again, it's really my honor, as the managing partner to accept this on behalf of the firm, because the firm really wants to be out there in the communities that we represent. So again, thank you, and look forward to many more years of working with this group. That is correct.
Well, thank you, Norman, and we, in turn, are looking forward to many more years of your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Leanne Carrier, Artist in Action. Leanne Carrier, a visual and performing arts coordinator of the Cy-Fair Independent School District for over 5 years, is the recipient of the Community Artists Collective's 2021 Artist in Action Award.
I'm Sarah Trotty with the Community Artists Collective. And each year, we produce an award for the Artist in Action. The Artist in Action Award is given to the artist who's done so much to help the community in the arts. And Leanne Carrier has done just that. Leanne, you've been there in times when so much has happened. You were there after Harvey when the Community Artists Collective went to the Astrodome and provided classes and services for youth there. You helped with supplies. You gave of all of your time, regardless how long it took. You were also there to help us in many other activities. You were very active with the mural programs in the city of Houston. In fact, I think you were almost a leader of that. And as well, you have offered your time and skills to help with art classes. These kinds of activities demand a lot of time, and you have given of that time. You are certainly an artist in action, and it gives me great pleasure to give you this award, the 2021 Artist in Action for Leanne Carrier.
Thank you, Dr. Trotty. This award is such an honor. First of all, I wasn't expecting this at all, and this is just truly my wildest dreams, just to receive an art award for something I'm doing in the community, just because that's not the reason why I have that I'm helping out the youth and doing arts in the community and trying to spread advocacy for art education. But most importantly, the reason for doing this is because of the students. And so being able to receive such an award is just, it's an honor, it's a blessing. And I also wanted to thank the Community Artists Collective for your influence and impact in my own professional journey and personal journey as an artist 20 years ago, as well as just this continued support from the Community Artists Collective and my art endeavors as a professional artist. So thank you.
Thank you.
Carol A. Pinkett is receiving the collective's Beverly P. Harmon Service Award. Beverly served as president of the Community Artists Collective Board for 3 years after first serving on the advisory council. She was committed, passionate, forceful, professional, and served with humor and grace. A perpetual plaque and award in her memory was established in 2019.
Good evening. I'm Sarah Trotty with the Community Artists Collective, and I'm very pleased this evening to present to you Carol Pinkett. She's going to receive the Beverly Harmon Service Award. And Carol, this award for you is really meant for you. Beverly was the kind of person that gave so much of herself. There wasn't a moment when she didn't have time to help out. She was quite a leader too. And she knew how to keep things on track, and that helps me think so much of you. She was the kind of person that could serve with a smile. She could give you a joke about what you've done wrong, and you took it as a joke. She was just that kind of person. So service with a smile, regardless to what the demands were. She met those demands. She was a true volunteer. And I know you know what a volunteer is, because
That's right.
You are one.
Well, I think I am.
You have volunteered to so many areas, with voting, with helping people with management. You were on our advisory council before you started finding so much time to give us as well. And you took the leadership of that council, calling people, getting them engaged, and now there are many, many more people engaged because of you.
Well, that's a nice thought. I think also they have a commitment. And all the people sometimes need is someone to ask, will you? And they say, okay, I will if you ask. So oftentimes I think volunteerism is there. We just don't know how to nudge it out of people. And it's something that I think is very needed, especially in our community, and especially with the Community Artists Collective group.
And that's something you've done very well. So this award, the Beverly P. Harmon Award, Service Award for 2021, says this award is presented for untiring support, generosity of time, and willingness to go beyond in service to the Community Artists Collective.
Well,
and
that's
we
great.
thank you.
I thank you for this. I thank you and also the board and everyone else who had an idea that Carol Pinkett should, be considered for this. This is quite an honor to follow this young lady. I didn't get a chance to know her well, but evidently, I hope I'm laying a foundation for her legacy to continue, because I would hope that this award would be given every year and her name would be mentioned every year. I think her family would be very happy about that.
And truly, this is the case. There's a perpetual plaque that hangs in the collective office, and your name goes on that plaque as well.
Wow. Okay.
And then the award you take home with you.
Oh, wonderful.
So
wonderful.
We thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
You're welcome.
What a program. This has been a wonderful night, and we can honestly say that we have enjoyed being in the company of some exemplary art supporters and participants. Before we go into our major announcements and end this extraordinary program, we have a few announcements and reminders that we need to state. The online auction winners will receive notice from the auction company. Winners will be able to pick up their objects from 12 to 5 p.m. at the Collective, Thursday through Saturdays. The Collective's address is 4101 San Jacinto Street, Suite 116, Houston, Texas. The phone number there is 713-523-1616. But an additional reminder with regard to the auction does not end until the 19th. So anytime after the 19th, you can come by the Collective during those hours, during those days that I just stated, and pick up your piece that you have won in the auction. The Collective is also assessing this event and encourages you to complete and submit a short online questionnaire. Every category will be assessed. The virtual program participants, raffle participants, auction participants, and in-person participants will be assessed. That helps the Collective make our next event even better. There are other acknowledgments that we would also like to make at this time. Most importantly, our underwriters. Our underwriters are HEB, through the wonderful work and relationship that we have with Leanne Carrier, the Group VP of Public Affairs, Diversity, and Environmental Affairs. We also want to thank Barry Barnes and Associates, PLLC, for their wonderful contribution as well. Our other sponsors for tonight's event are Norman Nelson, Managing Partner of Linebarger, Gogan, Blair, and Sampson, Percy and Cheryl Crusoe, Lester and Penelope Marks, Russell Jackson, who is President and CEO of Decision Resources, Inc. And I want to mention Lester and Penelope Marks again because we are in their wonderful home, and so they have opened their doors to us for this evening. So let's thank them one more time. Further thanks, as always, for any event such as this will go to our board of directors. Their names are displayed on the screen, but I will read them nonetheless. Myself, Barry Barnes, Susan Bynum, John Peavy, Winnell Herron, DeMonica Pearson, Dwayne Simpson, Daniel Testvae, Sarah Trotty. Thanks also to our collective staff, and their names are also printed, but I will read them as well. Michelle Swain Barnes, Executive Director, Leslie Abrams, our quilt studio instructor, Miles Payne, Exhibit Coordinator, Terry St. John, our marketing consultant, Shannon Teasley McNichols, our development consultant. Also, we want to give thanks to the CAC, the Community Artists Collective Advisory Board members. Their names are printed, and I will not recite them for because of time pressures. We want to thank our participants and donors whose names appear on the screen. The featured artists Trenton Doyle Hancock, and our silent auction artists, Erica Alonso, Mark Francis, Lamont French, and our art auction donors, including Joe Acker, Sean Artis, John Negrasso Duncan, Eddie Filer, Elizabeth Shelton, Shaniqua Smith, Douglas Welsh, and Charles Washington. A few more thanks. This may seem to be going on and on, but we do have a lot of people to thank. The people who worked on this wonderful program, including some of our committees, are Logistics, Sarah Trotty, Chair, Dayla Wade, Co-Chair, Lester Marks, Member. Programming Committee, Carol Pinkett, Michelle Barnes, Maggie Blocker, Gwen Frederick, and Neil Klein. Publicity Marketing Committee, Terry St. John, Michonne Benson, Denise Lopez, and Miles Payne. Tracking and Assessment Follow-Up Committee consisted of Mary Ashley and Russell Jackson. The Auction Committee consisted of myself and Michelle Barnes. The Fundraising Subcommittee consisted of Sarah Trotty, Vicki Trammell, Susan Bynum, Jan West, and Daniel Testvae. And I want to just give another thank you for Sarah Trotty. Sarah Trotty is the fundraising committee chair, event chair, and she has worked on this event very, very diligently, spending long hours to pull this event off. And I think she's done a wonderful job, and we also owe her another round of thanks. One last committee that we want to talk about or mention is our 35th anniversary committee. This is the collective's 34th year. This is collective's 34th year. And so next year we will be celebrating our 35th anniversary. As the balloons come in and we begin to celebrate, sit down. Sit down, sit down, sit down. As the balloons come in and the noise makers, and we begin to celebrate our 35th anniversary coming up next year, we do so in anticipation of a wonderful celebration, a wonderful event when we may be free of COVID restrictions and we can all get together and celebrate the arts and enjoy one another and come back together as a community on behalf of the Community Artists Collective. That is our last word for tonight, and I want to thank everybody in this room and outside of the room, those who we mentioned, those who we have not mentioned, for this wonderful evening. And we give special thanks for Percy and Cheryl Crusoe, Sarah Trotty, Michelle Barnes, our board of directors, Lester and Penelope Marks, our host and hostess for this evening, and certainly Melanie Lawson, who has provided the wonderful MC. I don't want to call them services, but those are services with love and community involvement. And with that, I guess we can say good night. Do we have a theme song?